Hey guys, this is Ian from Around the Ball HQ, joined by Rafael, and we're going to be talking some Steelers football today. First things first, I'd like to introduce you to Rafael. He's going to tell you a little bit about himself, and yeah, let's kick it off.
Yeah, I've been a Steeler fan for, God, it's been a lot of years. Probably became a fan about 1976. So obviously saw them during their heyday in the 70s. Really young though during that time, so can't remember much. But I just remember I started off liking the Cowboys
Oh, really?
with my mom. My mom used to tell me all the time how much I just liked the Cowboys, and then I ended up one of my mom's friends was friends with a Pittsburgh Steeler, and that Pittsburgh Steeler, I'll reveal him here momentarily. But he asked me why I was a Steeler Cowboys fan when I was like 6 years old, and I just told him about I love the star on the helmet, and he told me, well, I play for a team, and my team has three stars on our helmet, and it's different colors. And I was like, wow, okay, I like that. And he gave me a shirt, and I ended up becoming a Steelers fan. And that Steeler was Franco Harris. So
Oh, that's awesome.
that's how I became a Steeler fan. And went to Terry Bradshaw's last game at Shea Stadium in New York against the Jets, and this went to the week before that. I went to Pittsburgh, and a couple weeks before that, I can't remember. But yeah, just became a Steeler fan and lived through all those years of Cliff Stout, Mark Malone, Cordell Stewart, Bubby Brister before Cordell Stewart, and Neil O'Donnell before Cordell Stewart. But yeah, it's been it's been a lot of happy times, and seeing them win a lot. Went through all those years of seeing them lose a lot, and living in Miami during the Dan Marino heyday was always really difficult because Dan Marino was a great quarterback.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just became a Steeler fan. Over the years, I've gotten a little less emotional when it comes to the Steelers. I don't know why. Maybe it's just age, but it's I still enjoy watching the games. I watch them. I watch all the games. Watch. I think I never missed. I don't think a Ben Roethlisberger game.
Yeah.
So the NFL ticket, even when I didn't have the NFL ticket, I would go to the sports bar and watch it and order food and sit there for 3 hours and watch them either win or watch them lose. But just been a big Steeler fan for a very long time, and enjoy. Every year you have expectations, and but definitely less emotional than I have been in prior years.
Yeah. So, I mean, Big Ben, obviously, awesome career. I mean, franchises would love to have a career that Big Ben had. I mean, as a Jags fan, we've not had a quarterback that can deliver in that regard. Obviously, you guys are transitioning a little bit with the QBs, but we're going to talk all about that because a lot of good conversation to be had about the Steelers in general. One more thing about yourself. What do you do for work, and what do you do in your day to day?
Yeah. So last year I decided to, I've been an entrepreneur a couple times. When I was 22, I had my own business as a process server, and process server, means I serve subpoenas, I serve summonses. I did that in Miami. I was a certified process server in Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach County. It was actually my first, it's hard to say entrepreneur. I just worked for myself. I didn't have an office or anything. So, but I had clients in Miami, and they would call me when I needed to serve papers for them. I really enjoyed that. And then in 2004, decided to, have a passion for movies, as you know.
Mhm.
And I decided to open a video store. I'm not sure any of your people who subscribe or anything know what a video store is these days. But it was back. Obviously you rent DVDs and rent movies, and I kind of knew that business was going the way it was going because I knew what Netflix was doing. I do a lot of research, and as you'll tell, even with the Steelers, I do a lot of research. so I got out of that business, and at my age now, I felt like I wanted one more bite of the apple, and decided to. I bought a franchise business called Sylvan Learning Centers. There's 2 locations here in Jacksonville, and I've owned them now for about a year and 3 months, and it's gone really well. I felt like I wanted one more chance at it. I wanted to be, you know, write my own destiny than to work for somebody else, and that's what I'm doing now.
That's awesome. So I know I've got a few Jaguars fans, so a lot live in the area. So if you're needing tutoring for your kids growing up and stuff, or some extra help, Sylvan Learning is the way to go.
Not a shameless plug.
Yeah. Hashtag ad. So cool. So now we'll go ahead and move on to the football side of things
Yeah.
today. And I think the best way to bring up the Steelers is actually not starting right now. I think we should start over the past 2 years, really 2022, when the Steelers decided to bring on Kenny Pickett.
Yeah.
So obviously the expectations when Kenny Pickett was drafted in the first round was through the roof. Unfair to him, honestly. I mean, to put a franchise on your back at the age of 23, 24 years old is like absurd, kind of. But that's the way the NFL is today. What would you say was maybe the deciding factor on, hey, we need to move on from Pickett?
I think a lot came out, especially towards the end of the year, when he was hurt, was rehabbing. He had that ankle sprain, had that tightrope surgery, and then there was a lot of talk. It was I read the Post Gazette and the Tribune and Steeler Depot. I read a lot of different Steeler information outlets, and then there was that he was healthy enough to play during the time where Mason Rudolph was the starter, due to him injuring his ankle and the obvious Trubisky benching. And I think he was ready to come back, and the Steelers wanted to stay with the hot hand, which at the time I really don't blame them for. When you're winning games after going back and forth and losing and winning and inconsistently on offense, and all those variables, Pickett basically didn't want to suit up. He either wanted to play or was not going to suit up, and I think that's where the beginning of the ending started for him.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. Mike Tomlin did a great job, honestly, navigating through all that, and I think you got to give him a little bit of credit for sort of steering the ship when. I mean, think about it. When Matt Canada was fired, it was the first time an offensive coordinator, a coach, or anything had been fired from Pittsburgh in the middle of the season. You probably know the answer to that.
Yeah, it was since 1960s.
That's insane.
Yeah.
So
before Chuck Noll.
So no quarterback's going to succeed in that, but you got to be professional.
Right.
You're especially the franchise quarterback.
Right.
You've got to be able to take that on the chin. And we're going to focus on the Steelers today, but I watched Trevor Lawrence do it with Urban Meyer the whole season. Urban Meyer was kicking players, being left in Ohio at the bar, and every time Trevor Lawrence just took it to the chin. Every time the media asked him, every time it was talked about, and that's what you got to be able to do as a franchise quarterback. And if you can't do that on top of inconsistent offense, and it just doesn't work.
I want to go back to something you said just a minute ago. You said it was unfair to have the franchise on its back, but in reality, that's life in the NFL. When you're a draft pick, especially a number 1 draft pick. But think about it in this aspect. He was a 5th-year senior too.
That's true.
This is not a sophomore, junior that was highly ranked, top 3, top 5. The reason he was a first-round pick was I think it was slim pickings at the quarterback position. He came out during the worst quarterback draft in years.
Mhm.
And number two, I mean, he was a leader for the Pitt Panthers. He knows the expectations in Pittsburgh. They shared the same building. It's the other side of the building. He saw Steeler practices. He knows how things have run in Pittsburgh, and for him to have, I think the leadership questions came into play during that time period. He could have, that's where it started, and obviously it continued during the offseason. The moment Russell Wilson was brought to this team, he decided to, say he wanted a trade, and it was going to be an open competition at that point because he was, the head, he's the guy who the Steelers drafted. So, I just think it started to unravel for him here at the end of the year, and there in Pittsburgh, and for him to continue to go through, those, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah,
immatureness. I think that's where I think it even soured on the fan base.
that's fair. And honestly, this is where you could probably give some kudos to Omar Khan for cutting ties. I mean, all too often you have a failed draft pick and you just keep trying, keep trying, keep trying. And all those little things add up, obviously, to where they're like, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
But a lot of guys, I mean, you look at Zach Wilson, he just got traded this offseason, but they constantly were trying to get, and it was like, at some point, you just have to realize, okay, we drafted him in the first, but it's not going to work. And like I said, good thing they,
I mean, he asked for a trade, and with the numbers he put up in Pittsburgh, I mean, you're going to ask for a trade, they're going to oblige.
yeah,
He did not put up stellar numbers. Yes, I get, if for any Steeler fan, they're like, well, they had Matt Canada. Yeah, sure. But, I did see a lot of all 22 tape. There was a lot of times where there was receiver. Not everything can be blamed on the offensive
right,
coordinator.
right.
I mean, there were a lot of times that there was, wide open receivers that he just missed. He, even though he could throw on, outside the hashes pretty well, he had a good velocity for I would say an average arm that he has. But his accuracy in the intermediate routes it was not good. And, it was something consistent. So did the Matt Canada situation help? No, of course it didn't. Could he have been successful under somebody, that was a good offensive mind that could have put a system that catered to his strengths? Sure. But I think what really ended his era was, I think, surprisingly, the immaturity. Because I hate to say it, but if you're not being a team first guy, if your team is winning and then you're healthy, they want you to be a backup, and you're like, well, no, I'm
Yeah,
not.
yeah,
He denies it to this day, but there's just too many people that none of them have come to his defense.
right.
And there's a lot of people that are, happy with the situation that's there now that were players there last year. I mean, Pat Firemouth just came out 2 days ago and said there was lack of leadership since Ben Roethlisberger left. That is not a very singing endorsement to Kenny Pickett.
Right. And if you're talking about lack of leadership when you have the franchise guy, I mean, it's one thing like if this year they come out and say there's no leader. Well, you got a journeyman quarterback now and a guy on his rookie deal still that's now bouncing around teams. But so we'll get into that now.
Well, before we do that, Kenny Pickett now in Philadelphia, there's actually rumblings that he might not be able to be Tanner, I forgot his last name, the quarterback that's there with the Eagles. So that it just more than confirms what everybody thought.
What is rumored.
What is rumored, and the Steelers beat writers who have a lot of sources within the locker room, they still stand by the story. So they didn't publish a retraction. They didn't say that it was wrong. I just remember, as a matter of fact, when the report came out, he wanted to talk to the media and was very overly defensive during his interview. I mean, it is one thing to me, it felt like there was merit to the story.
Right. And like you said, nobody's denying it.
Correct.
Except Kenny.
Correct.
So you've got one guy denying it.
Yes.
It's probably a true story. Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. We'll go ahead and squash. Justin Fields is not starting week 1.
Yeah, I still stand by it. I still stand at Justin Fields because we're so early in training camp. The only thing I will say is the longer Russell Wilson doesn't play, I don't care what the Steelers, what anybody says, what ESPN reports, I've followed Mike Tomlin and the Steelers, very closely for all these years. The one thing that Tomlin loved was he had a franchise quarterback. He had a Super Bowl winning quarterback. And there was never a question who the starter was. And there was a certain amount of comfort that Tomlin takes when he had Ben Roethlisberger. Even to a fault, I feel like, because the last couple of years of Ben's career, I think was, they didn't really plan as accordingly as I felt like as they should have towards the end. Like the end came a lot faster than they thought it was going to. But I think that's why Russell Wilson, and Tomlin has said it, he actually repeated it, I think in the second or third day of training camp, that Russell Wilson is in the pole position because of his experience, because of his Super Bowl resume. He's a Super Bowl winning quarterback. He's been to 2 Super Bowls. Right. He knows what it takes to lead a team. He knows how to, bring a group of offense together. And I just don't think that Tomlin is ready to put this Steeler this season in the hands of Justin Fields, who is a great talent, but is still raw, that still has mechanic issues with his footwork. He's kind of slow to process at times, I feel like, in some of the stuff that I saw from the Bears games. He's made some nice progress during training camp, but when you start playing the same defense in training camp over and over, you start to get a feel of what that defense is doing.
Absolutely.
And I just think that, that Russell Wilson is, the guy who will be the starter eventually. I think there's talk that he's going to be a full go this week. He was actually, he had his first pass today, Sunday, during training camp. So I just think that that's the right direction for this team at this stage, with the incarnation of the team that they have right now. But I will say the only thing that will make me change my mind a little bit is if this injury lingers longer and longer and longer, because but it being so early in training camp, I still think Russell Wilson will come back and be ready to go.
Right, and you guys are not a rebuilding team.
No.
It'd be one thing if TJ Watt left or Minka left or some, some pieces left, but you guys, your defense is 100% ready to go for a playoff run.
Yeah,
and the offense has, honestly, the pieces. I mean, one of the best running back duos in the NFL when you look at a running back room. And then at the wide receiver position, could probably use another piece. But Pickens is still, from people that don't watch Steelers football, he's a question mark because you don't really know how much his potential is. You know it's a lot.
Yeah.
But when you have Pickett, Mitch Trubisky, and Mason Rudolph throwing the football, you don't get to see, and a bad offensive coordinator, all that just hides his talent.
Yeah.
And really, he could blossom. I mean, Russell Wilson, with some of his weapons in the past, have had insane years. And, and another thing, Russell Wilson doesn't have to come out the gate and throw for 4,500 yards. Najee Harris and Jalen Warren are going to take a bulk of the offense anyway. But all they need is the leader, to put it all together, not make stupid mistakes, and just run the game. That's it.
I mean, and that's the reason they hired Arthur Smith. was Arthur Smith a good head coach in the NFL? Well, we already seen that that's not the case, right? But his offense, when he was just a pure offensive coordinator with Tennessee, they just they were a very good offense, but they weren't a really good offense because of you know 2 or 3 receivers throwing the ball all over the place. It
Right.
was a 11 personnel, 2 tight ends, run the ball, play action off of the run. Um, a strong offensive line, strong running game. And if you saw the Steelers draft this year, that's exactly what they did. They were able to get an elite tackle with their pick because of how the first 5 to 10 picks went in the draft. The Steelers ended up with Fautano, who was a very quality tackle in college. They went ahead and drafted the guy who was the purest center in the draft,
Right.
which is another area of need. Zach Frazier. So Broderick Jones got drafted there last year. In the 4th round they took McCormick, who is a very good strong guard. Then we'll see how he develops with his punch and his hand use, because that is a staple of the Pat Meyer of being the offensive line coach. But everything that the Steelers did in the last 2 years is to be the type of offense that Arthur Smith runs, and that's why he's the offensive coordinator. Broderick Jones, strong tight end, blocking tight end that has Darnell Washington, strong tight end
Right.
that was known as the 6th offensive lineman in Georgia. That's his handle on Twitter, X, whatever it is. You know, with Broderick Jones, last year and him, and then now you add all these, those additional 2 offensive linemen. Broderick Jones another year under his belt. They added Isaac Samalu from the Eagles last year to go with that offensive line. So they're a very strong offensive line. Like you said, the 2 running backs are going to get the majority of the load. Arthur Smith is throw to the running backs out of the backfield. Russell Wilson, while he was struggled in Denver, you look at his numbers. His best numbers were when he was under center, rolling out play action. That is the staple of what this offense is going to be. So that's why I think the Steelers have an opportunity to be able to. I mean, they couldn't get much worse on offense. They were deplorable on offense last year. It was an eyesore to just watch all those games that I did and watching them offensively. You mentioned receiver. Yeah, they're trying to. They've got a hodgepodge of receivers there to try to find who's going to be number 2, with Van Jefferson, Watkins, who came from the Eagles, Scotty Miller, that came from the Buccaneers. They truly don't have a number 2. Do I think they'll make a trade? I think they will. Do I think it's going to be a big name? I don't think it will. People are like, well, why don't they? Why can't they get IU? Why can't they get?
Yeah.
It's because the Steelers are not going to. There's a pecking order within their organization and how they do salaries. They build through the draft. They pay their own players.
And
they do not go out and pay go get a receiver and pay them $30 million.
Especially receiver,
because the Steelers, have been able to draft receivers and make them, great receivers. Antonio Brown, now George Pickens. But I can give you countless of others who, Mike Wallace. There were the Cash Money Brothers, that the CMB that they were called during the time with Emmanuel Sanders as well. So they're able to draft receivers. They know how to draft receivers. I think if they do make a trade, it's going to be for a solid second type of receiver. It won't be a household name. It would just be somebody who can be a competent number 2 to be able to help out George Pickens. But I do think it's important, because if God forbid George Pickens gets hurt, they're going to have a lot of trouble.
Right.
But right now, Van Jefferson looks like he's kind of leading in the clubhouse as number 2.
Yeah.
But we'll see. That's where I think their weakness is still at receiver. That's really the most where I felt like their weakness is at right now.
So, given if they were to go in today with the roster they have, with the pieces they have, what are your expectations for? I'll go a step further than just Russell Wilson, but also Justin Fields as a backup. Like, what do you think Russell Wilson has a shot to get a contract extension and play for another 3 or 4 years, or do you think Russell Wilson plays this year out and hopefully Fields plays good enough, in the preseason games and training camp and practice, and then he gets a small contract? Or do you draft a guy next year? Or, like I said, what does
Well,
Russell Wilson have to
I
do?
definitely think it's a unique situation, mainly because I don't think the Steelers. I mean, the Steelers were in this situation when Ben left. They signed Trubisky the first day of training. The first day
Right.
of free agency, which was a head scratcher. I think they went looking in the draft. A lot of people had Kenny Pickett going a little bit before number 19, so it was going to be somebody after Kenny Pickett. And I think when Kenny Pickett kind of fell on their laps, they felt like, okay, we can make this pick and we will have our franchise quarterback. Um, to answer your question, I really don't know, mainly because I don't know what type of Russell Wilson we're going to get. If we're getting the last 2 years of Seattle Russell Wilson, then there's a chance that he could have an opportunity to maybe get another contract with the Steelers. It would probably be something in a 2 year
Yeah.
or 3 year
He's
type of.
35.
He's
So,
35, so I think it could be a 2 to 3 year type of thing. Mainly, but he's going to have to play well. I mean, if
right.
if he doesn't play well, you know, Omar Khan's come out and has said, that they're not going to be giving out any extensions to either Russell Wilson or Justin Fields. Um, that seems pretty accurate to me. I think he'll wait until the end of the year. Um, they have the franchise tag that they can always use. I don't think they're going to use it. I think they'll be able to come to some sort of, they'll have plenty of cap space. That's not going to be a problem. It's just how much do they value Justin Fields and how much do they value Russell Wilson. I think it's a kind of a play and see
Right.
because I don't even think the Steelers know how this is going to look with a new offensive coordinator, two new quarterbacks, a lot of new quarterbacks coach, new receivers coach.
Right.
It's not just the quarterbacks. It's just a change in philosophy, a change in offense. With the whole offense. I think it's going to be a wait and see and see how they do. But it's going to be fun, to watch it this year because I do think Justin Fields will get some looks as a quarterback in certain packages in this Arthur Smith offense.
Yeah. So, with that being said, how would you grade the offseason?
I think you can't build Rome in a day, and I think they had a lot of holes. I think in free agency they did. They ended up with Patrick Queen,
Yeah,
and
that was a big pickup.
that was a big pickup mainly because they have not had a middle linebacker that is usually your defensive quarterback. Where's the green dot? Make sure that the defense is in the position that they need to be in. And somebody who's got the speed from sideline to sideline and somebody like Patrick Queen. I think he was a big pickup, and they did not have to focus on middle linebacker in
Right.
the draft. Um, last year they lost all their middle linebackers during the season. They lost
Right.
Cole Holcomb, who is still not even ready this year. Landon Roberts, started battling injury. He was, 60% towards the end of the year. He was playing with a partially torn pec. They lost Quan Alexander. So what was a strength going into the season? By the middle of the season, it was, they were they were just throwing different people in there. Blake Martinez and all these names off the
Right.
streets that they couldn't do. So that was a real big pickup. Um, I think they were able to get a very competent, strong safety in Elliott, who was a former Raven, knows the division inside and out. Played against the Steelers, went to the Dolphins, and then he was a free agent from the Dolphins. He's not a set the world on fire type of strong safety, but what he is reliable. He's a good tackler. He can play in the box, and that gives a chance for Minka Fitzpatrick to become Minka Fitzpatrick again. Last year, they didn't have anybody who was reliable enough to be that strong safety. And Minka kept playing, and he kept, for the sake, he was the leading tackler 2 years ago and was up there as one of the leading tacklers again last year.
Right.
You can't have Minka Fitzpatrick being your leading tackler.
Right.
So I think they addressed those two big needs during free agency, and that was able. Then they were able to go into the draft being able to continue their focus on rebuilding this offensive line. Andy Weidl, who came from the Eagles, he was, the reason the Eagles are today is because of Weidl and his brother and it's them being there. But as you can tell, Andy Weidl has his his prints are all over the building of this roster because they have focused on on the offensive and defensive lines. And they're going to continue to do that. I think next year they'll be focusing on the defensive line as much as they were on the offensive line. They know that a lot of football games are won in the trenches, and he brought that philosophy. And I think the Steelers have been open-minded to it. So going into the draft, they went in. They addressed the center, tackle. They went for a receiver with Roman Wilson. I don't think he's going to be the answer this year. I think he'll obviously contribute, but he's not a needle mover of receiver yet. And then Peyton Wilson, who they were able to get, in my opinion, as a steal in the third round, even with his injury concerns. So I think they were able to address a lot of things during the offseason. So I gave them a high grade, better than in recent years, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you potentially answered the quarterback position for this year.
Yeah.
That's huge. Because looking at the Steelers the past 2 years, I mean, like you said, you can blame Canada, but it's been a bunch at QB and injuries, but QB has been a big, Pickett just hasn't been the guy that has taken over, and maybe Russell Wilson can't do that either, but at least there's a chance, It's a risk, but you guys got him on a vet minimum, and you have Justin Fields behind him. And honestly, I could see maybe a play or two getting Justin Fields involved a little bit.
Yeah.
Because he is so good with his legs. So.
He definitely will be.
Yeah. So with that being said, was there any move that you wanted to see be made?
Yeah, I felt like another receiver would have been better. They kind of went like dumpster diving, I felt like, in the receiver market. Nothing against those guys. I mean, Van Jefferson had a good first year with the Rams.
He's a solid vet, too.
Yeah, I mean, but then, he kind of fell out of favor a little bit, I feel like, maybe with the Rams, and then he went to Atlanta. I think he was picked up kind of not at the beginning of the year. I don't remember what his path was in Atlanta, but if he can play what he played with the Rams the year they went to the Super Bowl, I think they'll have a competent number two. But I just don't have the confidence in that because he hasn't shown it in 2 years. So I feel like they could have. I'm not saying Ayuk or Cortland Sutton or any other one of these receivers that we as Steeler fans would love to fantasize about. But somebody who could have been a quality number two. I think I think that would have been what I felt would have been the missing piece at least this year. I think D-line depth is an issue for the Steelers too. I think that's something that you'll see them address during the draft next year, probably with multiple picks within the first 4 rounds. Cam Haywood's just older. He wasn't 100% last year. Larry Ogunjobi hasn't been healthy in 2 years. And, the Steelers' defensive line is very important to the success of the Steelers' defense. So I felt like they should have been able to address D-line and those two positions, receiver and D-line depth, would have been things that I felt like they should have been able to do better in addressing.
So with all the moves and Joe Burrow getting healthy, actually the Ravens lost a lot of coaching staff this offseason. They lost Patrick Queen. And then the Browns have Deshaun Watson healthy, which, that is what it is. What do you think the expectations for the Steelers should be this season?
I mean, I know a lot of Steeler fans would say to win the division. Mike Tomlin's record kind of reflects that. They've done really well within the division, especially. I don't have the numbers handy, but I think you and I talked about that Lamar Jackson has the worst numbers against the Steelers.
Yeah, by a lot.
By a lot. I mean, he has thrown more interceptions than he has touchdowns. He's fumbled more than he has rushing touchdowns. The Steelers have just been able to play him really, really well. I think it's still going to be hard for them. Look, I'm a realistic fan, and I think there's too many question marks for the Steelers for them to be able to be considered, not to finish in third or fourth place in the division this year. But because they have so many unanswered questions, they also could be the surprise of the AFC.
Absolutely.
Because if Russell Wilson is able to play like Russell Wilson a little bit and kind of thrive in this offense, I think there's an opportunity for him, for the Steelers to make some noise. But even we haven't even seen him
right
in training camp yet because he got injured, doing sled pushing, which that's been questioned in Pittsburgh. They have a new strength and conditioning team there. He was pushing a sled, and quarterbacks don't really do sled pushing. But he got injured. So, it's just too many unknowns. I think, for that, I think it'll be competitive. It's going to really be interesting on Hard Knocks. And
I forgot about that.
And the first half of the year will kind of, if they're able to get off to a good start, they're going to have to. They're going to have to get off to a very good start because the end of that schedule is murderer's row. Yeah. They play the entire AFC North twice during the second half of the year. It's going to be a challenge for them. And if they come in after the bye week 4-4, I could definitely see Justin Fields coming in towards the last quarter of the season and kind of seeing what he has if they're already out of it. But at the same time, there's just so much unknown. If they come out of it 6-2, Justin Fields might never see the field other than one play here, one play there, or Russell Wilson getting hurt. But I would say since I have to lean on the unknown more than the known, I think that they're a third place team. I still think they'll beat the Browns because the Browns are the Browns. But the Steelers, I think the Steelers will not. They won't finish last in the division, but I do not see them finish in the first two spots right now.
Right, and it'd be interesting to see. So Burrow's finally healthy.
Yeah.
And to me, he's definitely a top 5 quarterback when healthy.
Yes.
So we didn't discuss this, but I'm curious your thoughts on him because I have him as my number 2 quarterback. Mahomes 1, Burrow number 2. And you could put him at 3 with Allen or somebody in there in the mix. But when do you... Availability is also very important.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how more can we? How much longer can we say when healthy when we're talking about him in a top 5 conversation?
Yeah, I think that represents all players, really, right? I mean, availability is, a lot of it is fluke, obviously, but I think, and this is where I kind of not trying to compare the Steelers situation to them, but I think that's one of the reasons the Steelers have been really, really patient with Russell Wilson. You remember last year, Joe Burrow went out there and he kept on pushing himself when he had that strained calf muscle, right?
Yeah.
And then which led to, he ended up having an injury-plagued season. I don't think he was ever 100% from that calf strain because he tried to rush himself. When he's on the field, he is, in my opinion, I've seen him literally pick apart the Steelers defense, the Ravens defense.
Top defense
in the league. He's just picked apart. He's just very accurate. I agree with you. He is up there and, when healthy. I think it's going to be interesting to see how he does this year. I think if he stays healthy this year, I think the Bengals are a top two, top three team in the AFC. And I just, he is. I just think his football IQ is off the charts. His accuracy is, his decision making is on point. And when he's good, he's really good.
Yeah.
And he's been the only one that's been able to dethrone
Mahomes,
Patrick Mahomes, right?
That's true.
And he had a really, if it wasn't for that bad offensive line, I feel like they could have won the Super Bowl.
Absolutely.
I mean, that offensive line was just terrible. And it reared its ugly head at the wrong moment during the Super Bowl.
Yep.
So, yeah, I think within the division, I think Lamar still has to prove to me that he, as great as he is when he has the ball and, is one of the top 2 or 3 most difficult person to defend. But there still comes times during games where if he gets highly emotional, and I think when he's emotional, he tends to make not the right decisions. And you can see him; he does get frustrated quite a bit. It's funny when I hear people talk about like George Pickens and stuff like that about having emotion on. I mean, you've seen him like throw his helmet, destroy his helmet, kick his helmet. I mean, when he gets down on himself, he gets down on himself. And I don't know if he gets down on himself or he's just not happy about the play call, whatever the case. Nobody really knows during the heat of the matter during those times. But I still think the Bengals are the better team. I think if Burrow's healthy, they're better than the Ravens. Period. End of story.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think the Ravens, to me, obviously they're always going to be up there. Harbaugh is a great coach. They've got their quarterback. They've got multiple pieces on offense, defense, strong offensive line, and pairing that with a quarterback that can run is pretty deadly.
Mm-hmm.
But the Browns,
a
talented roster.
Talented
roster.
Defensively, they're great too.
Right. But the question mark, and really, honestly, it's funny when you think about the Browns, they could have really screwed up the quarterback market if Deshaun Watson would have panned out.
Mm-hmm.
Because they gave him that $230 million guaranteed, fully guaranteed.
Yeah.
And if he would have came out the gate and took them to playoffs and not got hurt and stayed out of trouble and all that, the quarterback market would be insane right now.
Yeah.
And it's already insane, but it would be really insane if that was the case.
Yeah, I just think Deshaun Watson not playing for a couple of years, he aged 2 more years. Then he comes back and basically he lost 3 years in this.
Yeah.
I mean, roughly, right? And I think he hasn't been the same. There's been times where he's shown that he. It's funny because there's a couple of times I'm like, oh my god, maybe he is really back, but then he has another game that he's just horrible.
Right.
And I don't know. I just think Cleveland. I think their defense will still be great. Myles Garrett is a great defensive player. I think they've got good corners, good linebackers. I think they're just a really good, solid foundation team when it comes defensively. And Stefanski's a really good offensive mind.
Yeah.
I think their running game is, with Nick Chubb is really good. His offensive line, you talk about offensive linemen, but Cleveland has, guard tandem and tackle that are just really great run blockers. Nick Chubb always gives me nightmares when I'm seeing the Cleveland Browns play. But yeah, I just think I think the Browns are the Browns' worst enemy. And
absolutely.
And I just think, and when I say that, I feel like they're going to finish 4th in division. I still think that's still going to be a good record.
Right. It should be 8, 9, 10 wins.
Yeah, I still think it's going to be that 8 and 9 win area. But I feel like if they had a different quarterback, they might be a lot higher up there. For sure.
Almost as if they would have kept Baker Mayfield, they might have.
Who knows?
But, I mean, Baker's been doing pretty good in Tampa.
He has.
I mean, and I would say the Browns roster is way better than Tampa Bay's roster.
And I think he matured. I actually think
That too.
I think that when Baker went and spent that half year with the Rams and Big
Right.
Bay,
And then the Panthers. The Panthers, right?
I can't recall.
No, actually, Rams, Tampa. It was somebody else that went to.
Yeah, he went to Tampa right after.
Yeah,
that. I think he kind of grew a little bit. Even though I loved his commercials. You know, I thought, you know, I did not dislike Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, right. I'm the same way.
But I just, you know, who knows, you know, what they would have been if Baker would have stayed. But I feel like, you know, Tampa Bay gave him the money, you know, now after, you know, him being there for a year, and let's see how he does. But yeah, I definitely think the Browns, they're always going to have to be a prove it to me. I have to see it. Prove it to me.
Yeah, that's fair.
I'm not ever going to buy into any offseason hype with them until I actually see them do it.
That is what happens when a team consistently messes up.
Yeah,
and they had it on a silver platter.
Yeah,
they have the coach, they have the team, and like I said, I think if they would have rolled with Baker Mayfield, I think it would have been like a Jimmy G situation where they would have won in spite of the quarterback. Mm-hmm. But it's different when you have a mid-tier quarterback and then you go to a low-tier quarterback and paying them,
right?
You know, at a high tier.
Yeah. I mean, I think that was probably the mistake, right? Because they gave him all that money before knowing what he could do after being out.
And that's the thing. He was out. Yeah. It's not like he was playing
right.
and then got in trouble and all that. But he was out with an injury, then was suspended
for a whole year.
And, I mean, you just can't, like you said, you already have to gamble enough at the quarterback position when it comes to drafting, paying. You need to at least see it, you know, before you.
And everybody always goes back to that game against Kansas City in the playoffs. Remember, they were up 24-0.
Right.
And everybody's like, "Oh, you know, the defense of the Texans." I'm like, "Well, you know what? I mean, it's not like pickup basketball that you score, you keep the ball.
Yeah,
the offense does get an opportunity to get the ball back and make something happen, and that did not happen." And I remember that. I don't know if it was that particular year, but I also remember when the Texans played the Steelers. It was either the year before or the same year that they lost to the Chiefs in the playoffs. I just remember Deshaun Watson had such a great first half against the Steelers, and then in the second half, they made some adjustments and they couldn't do nothing. And the Steelers ended up like beating their brakes off the second half of the game, versus, you know, during the first half they were going up and down on drives. So again, Deshaun Watson, talented player when he was in with the Texans. I haven't seen it in Cleveland, and you're just gonna have to prove it to me. So if you ask me what my AFC North division looks like, if healthy, which is always the big if, it's the Bengals, it's the Ravens, it's the Steelers, and it's the Browns.
And honestly, it's rare for a fan to not be biased. So that's much respect there.
If it was 15 years or 20 years ago, I might be like, the Steelers are in first place, and everybody. I don't care what anybody else does. But I feel, you know, with all 22, with as much as information there is these days, with the advanced analytics, I feel like I've become more of a fan of the game than of the actual team as it is. Trust me, I'm always going to be a Steelers fan at heart, no matter what. But you just start to really understand, you know, when it comes to how can a team be successful,
right?
And you know, and I feel like this is the first year that I felt like the Steelers made the right steps to being that, to doing some, you know, to start building something special there. By, you know, going offensive line and getting two of the top offensive linemen in the draft with their first two picks, by drafting to, you know, and then using free agency correctly in kind of plugging some, you know, you need a middle linebacker. What do? Right. You get the best middle linebacker out there. You do two things. You take them away from one of your rivals,
right,
and you put them on your team.
Yeah.
that you haven't put your all-world safety in the right position to make plays. So what do? You get a competent, strong safety that gives you the opportunity to go out there and put him in an area where he can start making plays and being more of a center fielder than having to play in the box. Like this was like the first time that I felt like, wow, they hired an offensive coordinator who's been wasn't a really good head coach, but at least he has head coaching experience, and he's a really good offensive. The last time he was an offensive coordinator, he was extremely successful.
Right.
And then these last two drafts, I feel like they've done the right things to put themselves in position to be. Now they just have to find the quarterback. Is it Justin Fields? Is it Russell Wilson? We'll see. But it's the unknown right now. You've got two unknowns there.
Yeah. So with this NFL season, do you have any matchups? Whether it could be the Steelers, it could be any in particular that you're looking forward to.
I mean, as much as I love watching my team play, I will watch him every single week. But I love watching Patrick Mahomes play.
Yeah.
And watching Patrick Mahomes, I think they played the 49ers during the regular season this year, don't they?
Yeah, and they also play the Ravens.
And they play the Ravens. I am definitely going to be looking forward to watching because, when you look at the odds, right? The odds are, okay, let me ask you a question.
Okay.
Who do you take, the field or do you take the Chiefs?
I'll take the Chiefs almost anytime.
Right. I mean, the 49ers have been probably the team that had the best opportunity to beat them, right?
Yeah.
And I felt like that was the case a few years ago when the 49ers played them in the Super Bowl also, they still had that type of team. They had Garoppolo at quarterback, which was a problem, but everybody forgets that the 49ers were winning by like 2 scores in the third quarter. They were there. But, just watching this man play with literally, no offense to any Chiefs wide receiver fans, but he's literally playing out there with UPS drivers.
Absolutely.
I mean, literally. And he still wins a Super Bowl. Like, everybody knows, cover Travis Kelce. Anybody can beat me except Travis Kelce.
Yep.
And he still did it last year. And now this year, he actually has some wide receivers.
Yeah.
So it's going to be, he's one person that has been able to stay relatively healthy.
Yeah.
He had some injuries here and there that, he wasn't 100% in the Super Bowl when they lost to the Buccaneers.
Right.
He wasn't 100% this past year. He had that ankle situation, but it's football. You're never going to be, 100% healthy, right? So my matchup is anytime I see the Kansas City Chiefs, it's going to be a fun game. But when they start playing the Ravens and they play the 49ers, those are the games I'm really going to look forward to because that's probably. And I don't know if they play the Bengals this year. I haven't had a chance to look at their schedule.
No, I didn't see their.
I didn't get to see. But as much as the Ravens, that was the AFC. The AFC Championship rematch from last year. Nothing. I mean, I still think that at the end of the day, the Chiefs are just better than the Ravens, and I just don't think they're the team. I think that the Bengals would be the team that would have, to me, a better shot in beating them. Just my opinion on that. They do actually. The second game of the season, the Bengals are at the Chiefs. Ooh. So that's going to be like, you talk about 2 weeks in a row for the Chiefs. The Chiefs don't have it easy. They have.
You won the Super Bowl.
They should. They've won 2 straight Super Bowls. But they play the Ravens and then they play the Bengals in back-to-back weeks to start off the year. So it's going to be a lot of fun, to watch them play. Then they play the Falcons. Then they're at the Chargers. Justin Herbert.
Well, he's hurt.
He's hurt. Yeah. He's hurt. He's not. 100%.
They're saying he should be ready by the start of the season, but
plantar fasciitis is no joke.
And that's something that could linger the entire year.
That's very painful.
That's not good for them considering the Chargers are not very healthy. So
but that's probably That's my best answer. Watching the Chiefs play.
Chiefs, yeah.
So I'll be looking forward to watching, those back-to-back games, the Ravens, and obviously I'll be a real big Chiefs fan. For both of those
Yeah,
games.
both weeks.
Both weeks. So I'm going to be a Kansas City Chief. I'll have my Kansas City Chief pom-poms on.
So, being a Steelers fan, it's got to be very frustrating for you. Specifically, I could talk about a lot of Steelers players that are very undervalued, but TJ Watt is one of the most disrespected, and I'm saying this as not a Steeler fan. He's the most disrespected player in a long time that I've seen that is just outright disrespect when it came to Defensive Player of the Year last year. And when it comes to the Madden ratings that just came out, they had Myles Garrett and Michael Parsons at 99, and TJ Watt was a 97. Yeah. So as a Steelers fan, how do you not let that get to you, or do you let it get to you? And
just... I mean, it definitely gets to me because people don't I think sometimes while I'm not trying to contradict myself because I was just talking about how these stats and these analytics are really good. One of the areas that he gets constant, that everybody says, well, he doesn't. I forget what's the stat.
Pass rush win rate.
Yes, rate. The pass rush win rate. Yes, sorry, I just lost it in my mind for a second. But what they don't consider is all the other stats that he that he does. Do you want to take a guess what the Steelers' record is without TJ Watt in the line?
Oh, geez. I'm sure it's bad. I'd go. How many games has he missed?
11.
11 games missed?
11.
I would say they probably won. He played with Big Ben, so probably won 6 games, half.
So you think that it's
about half? Yeah,
they've won half the games without him.
That's what I would guess because I assume Big Ben might have carried them a couple times. So.
Well, the answer is no. The answer is they're 1-10 without him.
Okay.
And the first game that they won, I think, was the 10th game is the one that they won. And actually, ironically, they beat Tom Brady without TJ Watt. And that was the last year. That was Tom Brady's last year. That was in 2022. And it was in Pittsburgh. That was the only game they have ever won without TJ Watt.
Jeez.
That's one of the things. Like, how many sacks do the Steelers get when he's not playing? They average one. So that's what I'm saying. There's that one stat, right? The win rate.
Right.
But let's look at all these other stats. Wins and losses matter. The last time I checked, 1-10.
The biggest stat.
So they're basically have a winning percentage of 0.100, like 100.
Yeah.
100 winning percentage, which is horrendous.
Right.
They generated when TJ Watt does not play, they get 1.1 sack a game. Blitzburg, what the Steelers are known for, pressure, they get 1 sack a game. When he's in the lineup, they average 3.5 sacks a game.
Wow, triple. Almost quadruple.
Yeah, almost quadruple. So, and then all these years where, there's when they've been out with other players, points per game. When he's not playing, the Steelers give up 26 points a game. When he is playing, they give up 20 points a game. That's 6 points difference in a game. That's pretty big. So while I get this win rate and all that, by the way, his record when they do play, when he does play for the Steelers, 53-24-2. 29 games above 500 versus 9 games under 500 when he doesn't play. So don't give me all this win stuff.
Yeah.
I get it. It does play a factor, sure, but it's not the only factor. And then you got to look at everything else. I mean, he, tied the sack record with Strahan, and he missed 4 games that year.
That's insane.
He could have. If he didn't miss 4 games that year, he had a shot. Or 3.5 games, something like that. He still missed time during that year, and to me, that just leaves. I don't know. That just, they're just not a really. He is. Sean Mc. They actually interviewed, McVay, who is he's a genius, right?
Yeah.
They called him the boy wonder, didn't they?
Mm-hmm.
Right. he basically said that you had to play. Like they asked him about the interception. Like he was like he couldn't understand how T.J. Watt intercepted that pass. Like how he read his own offense and was in the right place at the right time, and how he ended up, how he wrecks games as a player, and how he literally spends when he prepares for the Steelers, he spends a lot of time on T.J. Watt. So what? And I'm sure he's not the only head coach that spends a lot of time with T.J. Watt. And for all these people that double team him, they chip him at the line and all that. He has the most pressures. He's had the most sacks. Yes. Do I think most pressures is you don't get a sack, but you're still flushing a quarterback out of the pocket. You're rushing him to make a pass. I think you and I talked about it when Josh Allen, he was up there in pressures.
Right.
Everybody forgets, well, that's that. They were like, well, that means they failed to get to the quarterback. Well, no, they actually made an impact on the play too.
Mm-hmm.
Pressure is a pressure. That means they're throwing the balls too soon. They're having to scramble out of the pocket. Whether they made a play or not, whether they got the first down or not, is irrelevant in my opinion. They were disruptive on the play.
And that stat alone means they did their job
exactly
67 times, 100 times.
So, to me, it's constant disrespect because of the win ratio. I do think in watching him last year, I felt like he wasn't as good as he was in previous years. But that's still, he was amazing still. He was still amazing. I mean, but he did have a couple of games where I felt like he probably overmatched the person. But again, they're double teaming him, triple teaming him, chipping him at the line. And I think he's going to play even better this year than he did last year.
And to say that
I think so.
That's a lot of that could be a monster season.
Yeah, sure. I mean, Cameron Hayward was hurt, and believe it or not, he makes a big difference because
absolutely.
You can put Cameron Hayward as a Pro Bowler, and he's a guy who is strong as an ox. He's an anchor on that line.
Yeah.
So I definitely think healthy Hayward is in a healthy Ogunjobi right now. Knock on wood. I think they'll be able to help him be even, have a better statistical season than he did last year.
And that's also a good point that you just said. Edge rushers rely on the other guys around them. If you do not, and that's something. Obviously, we just paid Josh Allen as a Jags fan. Josh Allen just got a huge contract. When you can put up 17 and a half sacks, which is what Josh Allen did, and you do that with virtually no interior D-line, that is impressive. So the fact that T.J. Watt produced when you have Hayward out or Ogunjobi out, like that's says a lot.
Yeah.
That
I think he had 19. I think T.J. finished with 19 sacks.
To have linebackers out and safeties. And secondary is another big thing. You guys had a lot of injuries at the secondary, and there's coverage sacks that could be missed, or a sack could be taken away from you because if a corner's burnt in 2 seconds, odds are you're not getting to the quarterback that fast. But TJ Watt does sometimes.
Yes.
But
and the level of competition he plays,
that too.
AFC North is a tough division to go up against.
You're playing against Lamar twice, Joe Burrow twice, and whoever the Cleveland Browns throw out. But they have an insane offensive line and a dominant run game. So says a lot that he can produce like that in such tough division.
Yeah, even Joe Burrow says his praises too, because he's intercepted him like twice by just jumping up in the air and,
I know, it's
and intercepting the pass. So
yeah, that's another thing too. His TJ, not that he goes into coverage a lot, but what other defensive end is getting interceptions? They don't. That Myles Garrett doesn't. He might have 1 or 2, but TJ Watt, you see him on. If you turn on ESPN or the top 10 plays after every Sunday, TJ Watt has a very high chance of being on those every Sunday,
and has a nose for the ball. He always knows where that
every time. Every time. It's really impressive that TJ Watt is as good as he is. I mean, came from a family of. Obviously, J.J. Watt is also an insane player. But,
he is.
Or was. He retired, but You know,
I think he might come back.
that would be insane. I would like.
I still think he might come back.
Derek doesn't play for you guys anymore, does he?
No.
Okay, but that would have been.
But he's had
awesome.
a lot. He's had a lot of injuries, though. I think it's one of the reasons why he was. You know, when he went to Pittsburgh, he was. I felt like he was at decline, and it's a shame because I think a healthy Derek Watt, Chargers version of Derek Watt, now in this offense where Arthur Smith values the fullback position,
right?
I think would be. I think he would. I think he would do well in this offense.
That's. Did you guys get Johnny Smith? Or were we talking about that? Oh, I made a joke about that when Arthur Smith left the Falcons.
Oh, that's right. I mean, he did. He grabbed a few of the Falcon players.
Pat Freiermuth could have a solid year this year because they use tight ends in this.
Yeah, I mean, if you looked last year, I think the last 2 years of Tennessee, of their success when Arthur Smith was the offensive coordinator, it was one wide receiver that had the majority, AJ Brown, right? Mm-hmm. The second receiver and the third receiver, their targets were very minimal. It was really the tight ends and the running backs, Derrick Henry out of the backfield.
Yeah.
The tight ends that the Titans had that made plays. So that's one of the reasons probably that I feel like the Steelers probably didn't put such a big emphasis on the second receiver because they're going to play so much 11 personnel with the two tight ends and play action. But absolutely that I feel that Pat Freiermuth will probably have the best season this year that he's had if he stays healthy. And I think Darnell Washington will get some opportunities to make some plays. I think Connor Haywood, who is an H-back in this role, will get a lot of targets. So I don't think that I still feel strongly that the Steelers need a second receiver because God forbid something happens to George Pickens. They need a solid number two, and I think they're missing that. And I still believe that they'll make some. I still believe that they will make something happen before the season starts. It's just not going to be a fancy name. It'll just be a solid number two receiver name if they're able to, make a trade for one. But Pat Freiermuth also will get an extension this year. They're gonna.
Yeah.
The Steelers will have an extension announced for him at some point. I predict within the next week or so. So you heard it here first, and then within a week. I think that's going to happen. And because I don't think Arthur Smith is a one and done or a two and done in Pittsburgh. I think he'll be an offensive coordinator for a while until he shows why he was a head coach prospect to begin with in Tennessee.
Right, and I think part of that is I think people are going to look at one. There's like a way things happen. So next year, there's a bunch of coordinators right now that were passed up so they're going to get their chance next year most likely. So Arthur Smith for sure is going to need to sit a couple cycles before he gets a shot because he had his chance.
I agree.
And with him, a lot of times not all good coordinators make head coaches. However, there's a reason they got to that point at one point. Like you said, with the Titans, and as a Jags fan, I got to watch it. I mean, the Titans were a powerhouse. Granted, a very weak division for a lot of years, but they were a powerhouse. And when you can do it running the ball, and you pair that with a team that's good at running the football, the Steelers could make some noise for sure.
Well, it's just going to see how well Russell Wilson or Justin Fields. I still think it's Russell Wilson.
Yeah.
At least for the first 8 games of the year, it's going to be really how he does. And if the Steelers have a winning record, 5-3, 6-2 after 8 games, then Russell Wilson will be the quarterback most likely for the rest of the year. If they come to the midway point and they're 3-5, 4-4, I think patience will start to dwindle, and you might see Justin Fields out there to see what he has if it's somebody who they're going to want to make a commitment to financially next year.
Right, and it's a good time to do it, honestly. I mean, next year's draft class is good. It's a good quarterback class. I mean, there's a couple of prospects that'll come out. However, to not have to rebuild. Like, so if you do have to draft a quarterback next year, they're going to have a team around them. And a lot of times you draft a quarterback, they don't have a team around them.
Yep.
And that's why a lot of them fail. Granted, some of it's their ability once they hit the NFL, but a lot of times you throw some guys into some really crappy situations.
Yeah.
You know, and the Steelers, knock on wood, will never be that kind of a franchise because they always put themselves in position. Like you said, they draft well, they pay their guys so they don't have to pay premium when it comes to if TJ Watt were to be a Chief and hit the market and you guys want to pay him, it would have been a lot more money to keep him around. But they have a tradition, they have a nice foundation, and it all starts with the front office. A GM switch was just made last year, right?
Yeah.
Beginning of last year. However, he was a guy that was in the building.
Yes.
So the Steeler way is still going, but how would you say that switch has kind of?
Yeah, I think Omar Khan has a different philosophy than Kevin Colbert did. I think he kind of showed it his first year, where usually most of the Steelers extensions never really happen right away. They're always like the last week of training camp. And Kevin Colbert, when it's one thing when, even though Omar Khan was in the building and it was done as a, they say it was, by committee decisions, that nobody has the decision, a single decision. I definitely think, Kevin Colbert had his way of doing things. And, with Omar, he's different. He's a lot more aggressive. They've become a lot, they brought in Andy Weidel. And I think, between Andy Weidel and him and Tomlin, I think they all three kind of, I think that committee has become like a 3-person committee. I definitely think Tomlin's has gotten a little bit more power since Kevin Colbert left. I think his word carries more than it did, when Colbert was there. But I definitely think Omar, what he has done is, I think he's been more open-minded to free agency, where Kevin Colbert wasn't. A lot of times the Steelers would use free agency. They would mainly focus on lower tier players. They didn't want to have to go into the draft to fill a position of need.
Yeah.
They would sign somebody. They would put a warm body in there, and then they would go into the draft, and they would say, well, we'd rather pick the best player. But I feel like, was Kenny Pickett the best player that year at number 19? I don't know. I don't think so. I'm at number 20. I don't think so. I think, but they needed a quarterback.
Right.
And they knew Trubisky wasn't the long-term answer even when they signed him. So I think I like that Omar Khan has brought in kind of a, he's been a breath of fresh air. He's been, like I said, more aggressive in the free agency. I think, and he's allowed Andy Weidel to be an assistant general manager and kind of letting him build the team, through the power of building interior lines, at least on the offensive line, because the Steelers were terrible on the O-line for a few years. And, I think if there was ever a chance that the Steelers would gamble on a high priced receiver, it would be under Omar Khan, even though I don't see it happening. I think it's more plausible of it happening in this regime than it was with Kevin Colbert. There was no chance. I mean, it would have been beyond a zero chance. But there's a lot of trends that have been broken since Omar Khan. Like, Russell Wilson probably would have never been a quarterback that the Steelers would have gone after. They wouldn't have made a trade for Justin Fields. I don't feel like, if we were under the Colbert, the Colbert era. They paid, Isaac Seumalo pretty good money to be the starting guard. They paid really good money for Patrick Queen to be the middle linebacker.
Yeah.
Those are things that the Steelers never did before. Now, does it mean like they're completely different? No, but I just think there's been the tangible differences. Like Deontay Johnson, when he was kind of doing a hold-in, they did his extension right away, so he was able to participate in camp, and it wasn't until like the last week of camp. So that's why I say I think the Freiermuth will get done here pretty quick. I think there's a possibility of another extension being done. Maybe even Najee Harris. If, many people are saying, "Oh, we don't think so," but I think there might be. I think Najee's scheduled to make $2.9 million this year. That's criminal to make him pay to make him play under $2.9 million.
Right.
With with the Steelers running backs being the heart and soul of the offense. It's not the quarterback position that's the heart and soul of the offense at Pittsburgh. It's the running backs and the offensive line.
Right. And we had talked about that because obviously the tag deadline passed and he was not tagged, but it didn't make sense to tag him.
Right.
With the amount of money he would have made, the cap hit it would have taken up. It makes sense to do a deal.
Yes.
And not to tag him.
Yeah. And the Steelers are very known for not to want to work out a new contract when you've got 2 years left on the deal. They're not going to break precedents. They're just not. Steeler, being a Steeler fan, whether I like it or not, that's just who they are. They're not going to. Even though I've just pointed out some of the things that Omar Khan has done differently, there's stuff that are cornerstones within the Steeler organization that they don't do. Like, they don't guarantee a lot of second-year money. They only do that for people who are considered the best at their positions, like the Micah Fitzpatrick, the TJ Watt. But Alex Highsmith, who just got a contract extension last year, did not get guaranteed second-year money. And you would think Alex Highsmith would be one of those guys that would probably be able to break that trend. Hence the reason why I don't think the Steelers will trade for a big-time wide receiver, because they're going to have to give big second-year money, big third-year money, and they're just not that. They're not that team. So whether I like it or not like it, that's just the way. That's part of being a Steeler. That's the life of a Steeler fan. But I definitely think that Omar Khan has been able to work outside the lines of what we're used to seeing,
Right.
And has made some really nice progress.
Yeah. So if this was what you guys did before, now it's it's opening up a little bit.
It's opening up a little bit, which I think is a breath of fresh air. I felt like last year it was the beginning of something nice, and I think this year it continued. Under Colbert, it just felt like, man, we're going to go through this all over again. I felt like at the beginning Colbert was the right person for the job, but as the years went by, he kind of stayed steadfast in a lot of things. He didn't evolve, and I feel like Omar Khan will continue to evolve for sure.
Yeah, the past few years, the NFL's changed. It always changes, but I feel like the past few years, it's really changed. For one, defenses win championships. However, the past few, it's been offense. Well, granted, last year's Chiefs defense was top tier.
They were,
but they're a team that can change to what they need, because when they had Tyreek Hill, we talked about it so many times. Big plays were just every time. Every time they touched the ball, a big play was going to happen.
Yeah.
But then Tyreek Hill left. They had to change their entire offense because they didn't have that deep play. Mm-hmm. But then they do everything underneath. Patrick Mahomes throws it fast. And then they started to build the defense up a little bit. So now when the offense has no receivers, now they have a defense that even if Patrick Mahomes, which Patrick Mahomes doesn't do this very often, even if Patrick Mahomes can't lead drives down the field, that defense isn't going to allow a score anyway.
And that happened last year.
Absolutely, because no receivers.
Yeah, UPS drivers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He might have had, what's the word? Amazon driver. Whatever's worse than UPS.
Yeah.
So, but that's an example of a team that is willing to change with the times, and you've got to be able to.
Yes.
And so that might have been a good move to make, is to move on from.
Yeah, and it's funny, right? You go back to thinking about when they lost that Super Bowl to the Buccaneers. Was that like the best thing that happened to the Chiefs, right? Because that's when the change came.
Yep.
And then they haven't lost the Super Bowl since.
I know.
So
that's crazy.
It's just amazing to me. That's what that's why I think. Reid is just an incredible head coach. What Andy Reid has done, and well, it's amazing that the Eagles fired Andy Reid.
It is.
I mean,
Yeah.
but to think, to think about the evolution of Andy Reid, of what he ended up with Patrick Mahomes. You know, they won the Super Bowl. They come back and they lose. The throw to Tyreek Hill and hold the ball and throw it all over the yard. Didn't work in the last game of the year. They lose the Super Bowl. They make the change off, philosophy wise, like you mentioned. They started doing the short game, and they've been able to, play this well. But I think Andy Reid knew also that he had to build his defense up.
Yeah.
And the most amazing thing that I saw last year is when I watched the Chiefs play, and I think I watched almost all their games. I think if they played at the same time as Pittsburgh did, I would probably just go back and kind of watch some of the highlights, or just watch some of the game on the NFL Game of the Week, because most of the time the Chiefs are in the NFL Game of the Week.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing to me of how good the Kansas City defense was. And I didn't even notice how good they were until like midseason. I'm like,
Yeah.
God, they're good. They're like, they were, they had, Snead and, their pass rush. They were able to stop the run. I just saw how good their defense was. And I'm like, oh my God, they're not going to lose another. Like, I would be like, who's going to beat this team when they're playing like this?
Especially once they make the playoffs. I mean,
Yeah.
Chiefs playoffs is just different.
And then everybody started saying, well, they can't. It's not going through Arrowhead this year.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, they got to go on the road this year. And what did they do? They did go on the road.
Yep.
They went to Buffalo. They beat Buffalo. They went to
Baltimore.
They beat Baltimore.
No, not Miami. Yeah.
Miami had to go to that.
That's right, Miami. But then, like you said, they played in Buffalo, played in Baltimore.
And then played the best team in the NFC and beat them in overtime.
And honestly, I would say that the San Francisco 49ers, roster-wise, are the best team in the NFL, the whole NFL.
Yeah.
They've got whether you think about it or not with Purdy, I personally think he's a little overrated, but he's in the top 10 conversation at quarterback. They've got Christian McCaffrey, who's top 3 running back, wide receiver 2, top 15 wide receivers, Nick Bosa, Fred Warner. I mean, they're literally stacked everywhere. And without if Andy Reid was not in the NFL, Kyle Shanahan would be the best offensive play caller.
Yep.
And Patrick Mahomes I'll show you guys what I've got. And so did that defense.
So, yeah, I mean, and I think, I know eventually we're going to talk about Tomlin. I think this is probably a good transition.
Yeah.
And I feel like Tomlin, everybody asks, a lot of people have asked me, what did you think about the extension? Were you happy about it? I mean, there's 2 ways to look at it, right? There's the known, which is Mike Tomlin, which, I get sick of hearing that he's never finished under 500. I mean, great. That means we're now celebrating being mediocre. That means you didn't finish 8 and 9, but if you finished 8 and 8 or higher, that's great. And if I was a fan of, I don't know, what's a team that really doesn't have the Cleveland Browns. If I'm a Cleveland fan and that's something I had to shoot for, then fine, because the Cleveland Browns have never won anything. Period. But in Pittsburgh, that's not what they expect. In Pittsburgh, they expect championships. They won 4 in the 70s. They didn't win any in the 80s. They didn't win any in the 90s. And then in 2004, they won the Super Bowl. And in 2007, they won the Super Bowl. The Steelers fans are very passionate about, and Pittsburgh has always been called the City of Champions. That's been the moniker of Pittsburgh for as long as I can remember. But when I look at the landscape in the NFL, and I hear what a lot of the Steelers players that talk, mainly the TJ Watts of the world, the Mika Fitzpatrick of the world, like guys who are considered the best at their positions, right? They always talk about they want to play for Tomlin. Like, Tomlin's been this player's coach forever. So there's that. That's the part where I'm like, yeah, the extension makes sense. But the one thing I just talked about Andy Reid about evolving, and I feel like Tomlin doesn't evolve as much. I think he took too long to make the decision on Canada. Canada didn't work that first year. It was a mistake bringing him back the second year. I understand why. In a way, I understand why he did it, but I didn't agree with it.
Right.
To bring in another coordinator in Kenny Pickett's second year. But let's be honest, the offense was just stagnant, consistently. So I think the defensive coordinator, Terrell Austin, I think he's been average at best. I think I think there's too many times where he's kept people that maybe like that he takes command of certain things. There was reports that he calls the defenses. So Terrell Austin is there and he does the planning with the coaches, but at the end of the day, the person who's calling the defenses is Mike Tomlin. I just think if you're going to be a head coach, be a head coach. If you're going to, I think you and I talked about this too. I have been in my jobs before owning my own business. I was a director and I had managers that worked under me, but I never wanted to do their jobs through them. I had to let them go and let them do their job, and then hold them accountable if they weren't doing their job.
Yeah.
That's what you do as a leader. You just can't be like micromanaging them, or all of a sudden do what they're supposed to do, or do their job. I've just never been a fan of that, and I feel like that's one of the big knocks on Tomlin. That interview on the Pivot last year was a great interview for him. And he says all the right things, and as a head coach, I think he knows how to motivate. He's a leader of men. He knows how to motivate. But when it comes to the X's and O's, I think hiring Arthur Smith is probably. I think I don't know if he would have made that sole decision. I think he liked having Matt Canada, calling the offense, and the offensive coordinator he had before that was I can't even remember. But he didn't have a lot of experience as an offensive coordinator. Mm-hmm. So, if you're not good at, if you're wanting to focus on the defense because you're a defensive-minded coach, then hire somebody offensively that you don't have to worry about.
Yeah, don't have to look at.
Right. But I don't think he has that mindset. I feel like he's very hands-on-ish and micromanages to a certain extent. And I think when doing that, I think he kind of maybe suffers a little bit as a head coach, because there's been times where he's challenged plays and I'm like, why would you even dare challenge that? And clock management has been a problem with him in the past. Managing timeouts correctly has been a problem for him in the past. So, I think there's been a couple of games where I feel like he lost because of not handling the timeouts well, or doing clock management, which is vital as being a head coach.
Right. Yeah, that's
so. Yeah, so I think, if I was in the owner's shoes, would I have given him an extension? I probably would have. Would it have been a 2 to 3 year extension? No. Would it have been a 1 year extension? In other words, you still have this year plus one more. Right. I would have done that.
Finish this contract and then one more.
But at this point, after all these years of not even winning a playoff game, something's got to give. Marvin Lewis got fired because he couldn't win playoff games.
Yeah.
So why is Tomlin above that? And,
right.
Yes, great. You don't finish under 500. Guess what? If the Steelers, I almost, there's a piece of me, if they're not going to do anything this year, I want them to finish under 500. So just so we can get that stupid, the whole, that, NFL Network, ESPN, they all love to talk about it. But
how do you fire a coach that's 9?
Yeah.
Very easily, actually.
Easily, somebody who hasn't won a playoff game since 2000. I don't even know. I can't even remember the last year they won a playoff game. That's how bad it is. And I'm a Steeler fan, and I can't even give you the answer. I think it was the last time they went to. I think maybe it was 2010 or maybe 2011. I'm not sure. It was probably one of those 2 years. Was the last time. It's been a minute since they've won a playoff game. And they've had plenty of opportunities to play. Well, no, because they did play the Patriots in the AFC Championship when they had to go to New England. So it was probably somewhere in the 26th.
Right.
TJ Watt hasn't won a playoff game, and they drafted him in 16, I think.
Wow. So 2017, when we played you, that was a divisional round. You guys had a wild card a wild card bye, I'm assuming?
Because we won the division.
Okay. So before that, wow.
It was before the Blake Bortles game.
Wow.
TJ Watt has not won a playoff game in his career. And he's been there since.
That's crazy.
And his rookie year was the year that we lost to the Jaguars in the divisional round.
I would have never guessed that.
Yeah, I can't remember.
To your point, winning seasons don't matter.
No, that's exactly right.
It does to a point where you obviously need to be in the fight to get to a playoff game.
Yeah.
But that's kind of like my problem with Mike McCarthy of the Cowboys, or the Cowboys in general.
2016 was the last time.
2016. Wow.
Yeah, they beat the Kansas City Chiefs 18-16 on the 2016 AFC divisional game, and then they went and played the Patriots in the championship game. That they had no receivers in that game.
That is absolutely absurd. I would have never guessed that.
Yeah, so
I would have guessed 2020 maybe.
So that's why you can't continue to not make the playoffs.
Yeah,
finish with a winning record over 500, but not make the playoffs or lose in the first round, and not even lose like close. Like they've gotten shellacked.
Mm-hmm.
Like they come out looking like they're not prepared, and to me that's it might be perception, but perception is a reality in the NFL.
Yeah.
And if you are constantly getting beat in the first round of a playoff game, and it's not even competitive.
Right. Well, that's my thing with the Cowboys.
Yeah.
They're another team, similar shoes, where they are talked about as a championship team. That's their expectations. They have 5 Super Bowls. That's their expectation. And then when you come in, and they are very similar, except they look a little better in the regular season, in my opinion, where they're winning 12 games, 13 games.
Yeah.
But then you hit week 1 of the playoffs, and I think last year they lost by a lot to the Packers.
Yeah.
To a first-year quarterback. And that you can't – and to your point with the Steelers, if you allow your offensive coordinator to coach and your defensive coordinator to coach, they shouldn't look not prepared.
Right.
And if you're putting too much on your plate, that's an issue.
Yeah.
But, again – to your point for this year, I do think Mike Tomlin's the best they could have possibly had.
Yes.
With the team they have, the roster they have, Russell Wilson coming in, and Arthur Smith being the offensive coordinator, definitely the best coach they could have possibly.
Yeah. And that's why I was torn. I feel like if I was in their shoes, would I do the extension? Probably. But I wouldn't have done it for longer than one more year after this year. There comes a point where you have to just, you have to do it. You have to, and and will 25 other teams be lined up to hire Tomlin? Maybe, but you know what? So be it. Maybe it needs to be a fresh voice. And it happened with Philly, right? Andy Reid left. They fired Andy Reid, and they had to go through some coaches, and now they've got, I forget his name, but
Sirianni.
Sirianni.
But they were back in the Super Bowl.
They were back in the Super Bowl. So sometimes you just need a fresh pair of eyes. But that's the Steelers. The Steelers stick with coaches. How many coaches since 1970, Ian? 3.
That's actually insane.
16.
Well, what? So Tomlin's 20 years, right? If he would have been Ben Roethlisberger's
2005. 6,
okay. So almost 20 years. Well, 20 years by the time his contract's up.
Yes.
That's, and like you said, man, you gotta put the playoff. You gotta win some playoff games. And he did it Ben's rookie year, but
he did it after that too.
Or sorry, that was another coach.
Yeah, it was Bill Cowher.
Cowher, that's right.
Cowher coached one more year after that year. The Steelers finished under 500 that year. And then he left, he retired, and then Tomlin came in.
Yeah. Well, actually, your point about 25 other teams lined up, you would have thought that about Bill Belichick,
Sure.
Mike Vrabel, and neither one of them are coaching. I mean, well, I think Mike Vrabel's on the Browns as some kind of coach,
It's an assistant, yeah.
an assistant. But you would have, I mean, Mike Tomlin to me is above Mike Vrabel, probably not above Bill Belichick, but as a tenured,
Yeah.
defensive-minded coach,
Yeah.
So who knows? There might not be that many teams that would go after him.
And if I was Tomlin, and again, it goes back to, to me, it was questionable. Austin had been the defensive coordinator for a couple of years. To me, it's when it comes to the Steelers defense, that's the heart and soul of Pittsburgh as a defense. I think it's been mixed reviews with him, Terrell Austin, but you have Brian Flores in the building for a year. He's been a head coach with the Dolphins. He was an excellent defensive-minded coach. Tomlin praised him like crazy. I would have stuck with him than Austin. I would have moved on from Austin, keep Flores. Now you've got you get an offensive coordinator in Arthur Smith. Now you've got two coordinators that were former head coaches that you can let them do their jobs, and you can focus on being a head coach, and work on clock management and work on good decisions and being part of the game plans from a high level as a head coach, that there's like the way you're supposed to be, not be like in the weeds with every single thing.
Because I mean, that's to your point. It's not just something that you see on a Sunday. That affects you all week when you're trying to dip into the play and call the plays. Your week as a head coach is so much different than somebody that's not calling plays.
Yeah.
They might be looking a little bit more at like packages and the training portions, but when you're calling the plays, you can't watch the team. Both sides or special team. You can't pay attention to all that when you're calling plays on defense.
Do you think Andy Reid's focused on defense?
Absolutely not.
He's got Spagnuolo, who is a defensive mastermind.
Yep.
He lets him do his job. Is he involved in the offense? Absolutely, because he's an offensive-minded person.
Yeah, and
I think that's a little different.
I agree. I think offense is a little bit more complex. A defensive coordinator, there's no reason they should not be able to call the plays. Right. Absolutely no reason. Offense, a little different because there's some people that have made their name. Kyle Shanahan, Andy Reid. I'd throw Doug Peterson in there. Now with Brian Callahan going to the Titans. These guys are offensive play callers, and their strength, Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota,
right.
They're all guys that need to have the playbook in their hand because that is what they do best. And so that is a little different. But when you're a defensive coordinator, I mean, I know it's a little bit more complex than what I'm about to make it say, but it's cover 2, cover 3, and, or man-to-man, whatever. Offense is a lot more different.
Absolutely.
There's 1,000 offensive plays to 100 defensive plays.
Absolutely. So there's only a certain amount of defensive concepts.
Right. Yeah. You really have to. You'd be creating another wheel if you tried to come up with some defensive plays after 100 years. So, no, but that was an awesome conversation. That was really good. So we know your expectations for the Steelers. We talked about next year a little bit with the quarterbacks. We talked about the past. We talked about. I mean, I think we pretty much covered everything.
We did. Yeah, we pretty much covered all of it.
That's good. So, guys, if you're new to the channel and you made it this far, obviously you probably like the content a little bit. So like, subscribe, leave a comment down below. I'm over here all the time. So if you leave a comment on your thoughts, we can maybe do this again sometime and read some of the comments. And especially once the season starts, I'm sure we'll be doing this again.
Sure.
So,
and if you have any objections to anything that I said Steeler wise, I'm open to hear it. It'll be interesting to hear the feedback. If there, of your thoughts of obviously from if there's any Steeler fans that are listening that want to give some feedback, I would definitely be open to it. Everything is from my perspective and all the years I've watched the Steelers and knowing what they do. But I think it'll be fun to kind of address some of those questions or disagreements that they might have of anything that we might have talked about today.
Yeah. So thank you guys so much for watching. Every Tuesday, Thursday, I'll be uploading a video. So subscribe, turn the notification bell on, and we'll see you guys next time. Peace.